languages. What is going on? Just setting up the Q&A box. What's up? What's up? We got some folks in the room. How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? Okay. Now, let's see. Last time I had some popping and some cracking, and I don't want to have that this time. I probably should have checked how this works. I don't know how this one works, but so let's do a little sound check. Okay. Okay. Check. Okay. This. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me know. Let me know. Can you hear me? Hi, Shani. How are you? This is the pre-show. All right. So this is the part where you guys tell me how I sound, how everything looks, while I record some of the intro stuff. And we wait for our esteemed guest co-host, Jeanine, to join us. All right. You can hear me. Do you hear any popping or cracking while I'm talking? This has been an issue that we've had that I've been working on figuring out, updating software and doing all that good stuff, new equipment, new headphones, checking out to see what is causing that. I went to the Apple Store the other day and they said that it was most likely me having like 60 million tabs open at once, which I totally believe. That's probably the reason. They were saying that they don't think there's anything wrong with the microphone of my computer. So let's see, a little popping. Okay, we don't want that. So let me see if there's anything I can do to fix that. I don't know what this button does, so I don't know why I keep touching it. I'm checking to see if it does something. Let's try this one. Is that better or worse? Let me know if the popping is any better or worse. Lynn says same here. Okay, so let's see. I just switched a couple of things. Let's see if that is any better or worse. You guys let me know if you notice a difference. Better. Okay, Shani says it's better. Okay, hopefully that's the case. I think I'm going to be getting a big upgrade to my equipment tomorrow. So that should help all around. I think I've checked all the settings that I can. So I think that's good. Lynn says sounds good to me. Okay, awesome. Awesome, awesome. Hopefully that helps a little bit. And because I think that's as strong as a signal as I'm going to get. It's raining outside too. So we'll do our best. But welcome, welcome everybody. If this is your first time here, you are tuning into a live behind the scenes taping of an episode of season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast. And I'm really excited about our guest co-host today. I'm usually really excited, but I'm especially excited because this one has been a long time in the making. We've had a lot of reschedules and things like that. So I'm really glad that we're able to bring this episode to you guys. I think this is a super important conversation that we're going to have with a super important guest that I want to share with you. So before our guest co-host joins us in the next few minutes, I want to run through our intro a little bit. I always like to do that before they come into the room because it's a little weird when you're being like intro, you know? And I like for us to kind of more casually just jump into the conversation. So I'm going to breeze through this. You guys let me know if there are any weird sound or visual things that happen so I know if I need to re-record it, okay? All right. What's up, witches? Welcome to Season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast, presented by the Beyond BronxWitch YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alysha Kravetz. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki master, and owner of BronxWitch HeadQuarters, a spiritual shop and work share space in the Bronx, New York. This season, I'll be coming to you every week with a new topic and a new guest co-host to share our real-life experiences as practicing witches. Because when we know better, we witch better. Today's guest co-host is Priestess Jeanine de Oya. Jeanine has been writing professionally for over 25 years in the pagan community. She has done telephonic prison ministry for 14 years, assisting those who have heard the call of the goddess and Lord. Jeanine has had an online presence for African American Wiccans, both with websites and as an administrator of a forum since 1999. She has been practicing Wicca for 30 years, participated in many pagan circles, and became a priestess of the Correllian tradition in April of 2001. She now teaches and mentors an online written course for African Americans and pagans of color. Jeanine is a mother, grandmother, and spiritual warrior, and she is proud to take the title of crone. You can find Jeanine at www.aawiccan.org. All right. How was that, everybody? Minimal on the popping and the cracking, I hope. LMK. Does anybody else find themselves talking in like internet jargon and like emojis? I've noticed that those have become like a part of my vernacular. Like I say LOL out loud or LMAO out loud. Isn't that weird? But lately I've been finding myself being like IDK, LMK. Who do I think I am? One of the kids. Crazy, right? Woo! All right, while you guys are letting me know how the sound's coming through, how that intro came through, I want to remind you that if you are tuning in on YouTube, there is a Q&A box at the top of the chat that you can use to drop your questions for me or Jeanine. This is a great way to get your question answered, especially if you can't tune in to the entire taping. We'll be here for about an hour and a half once Jeanine joins the room. But if you can't stay for the entire time, then I encourage you to drop your questions in the Q&A box so that we can answer them during the show. You can always come back to watch the replay here on this channel, but that way you make sure to get your question asked. Sometimes people leave early and then they leave questions in the comments after. And I do my best to get those to the guest co-host, but you know, folks are really busy. So the best time to leave a question is actually during the taping. So even if you can't stick around to actually hear it get answered, you can always come back to hear it get answered. So feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A box whenever they occur to you. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that. That way, if you have to pop out, you can always come back and watch and see your question get answered. Or you can listen to the podcast when it posts on podcast platforms later on this fall, and you can hear your question get answered. But I would leave them in the box. Jamaican Douglas says, good. Thank you, my dear. That is good to know. I'm excited for my upgrade just because I feel like when when I upgrade something, I need to like do it all. Like I got a new work professional BronxWitch backpack to bring to the shop. And I couldn't put all my stuff in it and start carrying it until I did my hair and did my nails. I was like, I can't be raggedy halfway and then be like all together somewhere else. So I'm very much like that. So I've upgraded my headphones. Check these out. Aren't they fly? So I've upgraded my headphones. I've upgraded not the microphone, but like the cord for the microphone because I was worried something was wrong with that. And other stuff. And like the universe is like, girl, but your computer and your phone are kind of raggedy. And I'm like, no, I gotta upgrade everything. So shout out to Ellie Park at the Apple Store on Fifth Avenue, my business account personal shopper, who's gonna help me upgrade my tech tomorrow. That is exciting. But I'm really glad to hear that the intro came through okay. Not too much on the popping and cracking, which is good. Internet seems to be holding up. It's a little low. So we might have some lagging and things like that. But we are recording locally, which is a new thing that I've learned how to do, which should make all of the like podcast things a lot smoother, which would be really nice. All right, it looks like our esteemed guest co-host is in the waiting room. Yeah, oh my gosh. Come on, let's get her in here, guys. Yes. Coming to the stage, Jeanine de Oya. Hello, my dear. I cannot believe, can I just say, first of all, I'm so excited and honored to have you here. I cannot believe that you were worried about lighting or backdrop or anything. This is giving the witch vibes.
I can tell you, I put in a whole lot of work to get this lighting. I went to the window and everything. So I am as close to the window, my side doors actually, as I possibly can be. And then I have other lighting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but great job. It looks gorgeous. Yeah, it looks fantastic. We're kind of vibing here with our black on a little bit here. Yes, I'm feeling it. Yes.
Just like witches.
That's right. Just like us, right? It's almost like we knew. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have some psychic stuff going on.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. Can you remind me where you're located?
Oh, I'm in North Carolina, near Raleigh.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. So we're on the same time zone.
Raleigh, North Carolina. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, shout out to North Carolina. I love my family's from Charleston, South Carolina. So the Carolinas are my family's sprinkled throughout the whole Carolina area. So I have a soft spot for the Carolinas.
Yeah, I love Carolinas. Yeah, I do. I love both of them, South and North. But of course, I favor North because I had family. My roots are in North Carolina. Yeah.
Beautiful. And
but Charleston's beautiful. No, I just have roots here. My mother is from North Carolina. She's from the eastern part of North Carolina, near like what is this called? Bellhaven. Excuse me. She lives. She used to live near Bellhaven, and I think it was called Pinetown. It's near Little Washington, North Carolina. So we would come here every summer. From the day that we left school, the next day we were always on a bus, for the summer, and we would be on a bus, and we would take the trailways here to North Carolina, where my mom had my uncle and my aunt had a farm, and we would stay on the farm for 3 months. Yeah, June, July, and August. And then we would come back
to a very similar story. My mom would do the same. it might just be kind of, a down south kind of thing. But my mom and dad lived in New York. They came to New York in the 60s. And every summer, the day school was out, we were packed up with everything in huge suitcases. And we didn't do the trailway, we did Amtrak because we had a little farther to go. So we would Amtrak down to Charleston. My uncle would pick us up, and we would stay down on my grandfather's farmland, basically. And we wouldn't come back until the day before school would start back up, and then we would basically do the same thing around the Christmas holidays too. As soon as school let out, we would, head on down, and every time we came back, we would have boxes upon boxes of okra, shrimp, peas, greens, anything that my grandfather farmed or fished for. My mom would freeze up in his Ziploc bags and bring them back. And I never understood. I was always like, we have grocery stores everywhere up here. I don't understand why you make us, because the kids had to do all the lugging. I don't understand why we have to do this. And now, as an adult, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Such a big difference.
Yeah, there's nothing like fresh produce. It's nothing like picking up corn off the farm. We used to run between the tobacco fields and play. We used to pull the corn off the off the stalks and take it back, and my aunt would cook it for us. Watermelon. Watermelon is one of my favorite memories. Because at the house that we stayed, the farm that we stayed, it was my aunt, my mother's sister. But she married a farmer, and he used to farm. And there was a watermelon patch next to the house. And we as kids when we got thirsty, we would run over to the watermelon patch, and we would each get a watermelon, and we would bust it open, and it was warm and it was hot. Not the watermelon, but the temperature. And when we would bust it open, we would all put our mouths to the watermelon and just suck the goodness. It's something memories like that I will never forget. And my uncle had a cucumber patch. My mom would take us down the road to the cucumber patch, and we would get a bunch of cucumbers, and we all would bring them back. And the bad ones we would feed to the pigs, the hogs. And we would watch the hogs eating the cucumbers. And I would stay there for hours just watching them eat. I just loved the way they would enjoy the cucumbers. But I had wonderful memories. And I think that the memories that I had from going to the farm and being a part of nature is what made me the witch that I am today.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt it at all. I have some similar memories. My grandfather was a farmer, and he also grew watermelon, and so we were kind of small to be out in the fields. My mom would always try to get us to go. And of course, now as an adult, I wish I listened and spent more time out in the fields with him and learning a thing or two. But we were sort of spoiled city kids. We would be outside in that heat with all them bugs. So we would be in the house, and, we would go back to, the utility area of the house where you have the back door. And that's where he would drop off some melons, and we'd have buckets of peas to shell, and my uncle had a big pecan tree, so that was our snack. We wouldn't disturb the watermelon because my mom would get annoyed about that. She'd bring them in the house and clean them, and all that good stuff. But when we were hungry, we could run over to the pecan tree and help ourselves to whatever was on the ground, and we would just eat our fill of pecans, and we would eat our fill of scuppernong. They call them bullet grapes.
How lucky you are to have those.
Oh my gosh, it blows my mind that so few people have gotten to experience bullet grapes. And I learned as an adult that they're the only grape native to North America. All of the other grapes that we see in the grocery store are from Europe. They got imported over by European colonizers, but the muscadine or the scuppernong grape is actually native here. And I grew up, my sister and I, we would eat so much that our lips would start to itch. We had like a slight allergic reaction to them, but they were so good that they were one of the first things that I had to have my husband, before he was my husband, try when he came to visit. And he fell in love to the point where we flew up to Massachusetts for our wedding, scuppernong and muscadine wine from the Duplin Vineyard in North Carolina, because you can't get it anywhere else. And so we shipped up cases of it to serve as the wine at our wedding. So we had a little southern touch to our New England wedding. So I'm right there with you with all of those memories, and the way having that type of early exposure to the land, I think really fosters a curiosity in you and an understanding that there's something bigger and beyond your human self. And that the land is alive in its way. Just so many lessons that I learned growing up.
Yeah, I really feel blessed that I did have those memories.
Yeah.
A lot of children, they never had those memories, and I kind of feel for them. The children of today, even my grandchildren, all they want to do is just play on the iPads and the computers and watch TV, and they don't even want to go outside. But as a child, that's all I wanted to do. My mother had to drag us in the house, because I was so into nature, and we would play games outside, both because I'm originally from Philadelphia. So both in Philadelphia and in when we went, to the country.
Yeah.
Oh, the country, I just loved it because you can run in the grass barefoot.
Yes. Oh,
And
one
the
of the
trees.
greatest sensations ever, running in the grass barefoot. And I grew up here in the Bronx, and I think my mom always had probably a warranted kind of fear about the Bronx. And my father passed when I was maybe 3, so she was left with these little girls in a big city. And so other than going to school and to church, we really weren't allowed to be outside. So man, I couldn't wait until we would go down south, and I could finally get out of the damn house. And, down there she had no worries because everyone within ear range was family. And we're in a town, we're not even in Charleston, we're in a tiny town called Allendale, which is north of Mount Pleasant. Can't even find it on a map unless you're looking at a very local map. And so it to this day is the type of place where people drive by you on the road and they wave. They've never seen you before, but they wave and say hello. So she could really completely relax, and let us run around with our cousins and know that the worst thing that could happen, somebody might fall into the ditch or something like that. But it definitely fostered a curiosity and a connection to the land that I do feel, not just for this generation, but even people of my generation who just grew up in urban environments and never really got to experience the outdoors that way. So I do think that it sparks the witchiness in us, for sure. And I could go on and on talking about our country upbringings and the beauty of the South and getting, close to nature and stuff like that. But I want to go ahead and get rolling on our episode here. And first, I want to let you know a couple of administrative things that are helpful. The first thing to know is we are live right now on my YouTube channel with our very special YouTube viewers. But this episode will air on podcast platforms at a later date after it's edited and all of that good stuff, which means that we are totally free to make as many mistakes as we want. If the doorbell rings, you need to visit the little witch's room, you get a phone call, feel free to stop. We can start, stop, all that stuff. You don't have to worry about any of that. It can all be edited out later. So I encourage you to feel comfortable and, let the show flow as you would like it. And then the other thing to know is that when we get to the end of this recording, I'm going to ask you to go back into the waiting room like you were before I brought you onto the screen. And please just let your screen run. What's going to be happening is all of the audio that we're recording right now is going to finish uploading into this magical cloud that StreamYard has here. And you're going to see a little button that says how many percentage it's still uploading. And it will give you the okay when it's okay to actually close your screen and totally log off the internet or whatever it is that you have to do. But if you don't mind, please do leave your screen open for usually about 10 minutes or so while it's uploading all of your audio. So, and I'll remind you of that when we get to the end. And you exit the studio. So, but I just wanted to give you the heads up about it now, okay?
Okay.
All right. And then the other thing is you are our guest co-host. And we take that pretty seriously around here. So that means that you are totally welcome to steer the conversation wherever you would like it to go. Of course, I have a lot of things that I'm so curious about and that I want to ask you about, but there might be things that you just want to share with the audience that maybe I don't prompt with a question, or perhaps you even have questions for me or for our viewers, and I encourage you to let it all out and speak freely and feel very much like this is your episode as
well. Okay.
All right, good stuff. So in that vein, in the vein of it being a guest co-hosted episode, I have a little bit of acting for you, my dear, that I'm going to ask you to do. One thing that we've been doing since we started the show is we ask our guest co-host to kick us to commercial. We have a commercial break in the middle of the episode. But instead of waiting until we're deep into our really juicy conversation to interrupt and try to do a commercial break, we film that before we even get started with the conversation, so we can just stick it in later wherever it makes sense, okay? So I'm going to give you a line, and then I'm going to ask you to deliver that line. And you can do that in any way that you like. You can say it verbatim, repeat it exactly as I give it to you. Sometimes people put their own spin on it. It's totally fine. But the idea is we're going to commercial break and you are kind of just queuing us up for that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So usually what I tell folks is to say something like, and now is a good time for a break. Okay? And I'll give you a countdown. We'll take a breath together. You can deliver your line. We'll take another breath, and then we'll head on into chatting more about Wicca, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
Sounds
I'm going to give
good.
you, sounds good? Okay, great. I'm going to give you a countdown. We'll take a breath. Your line is, and now would be a good time for a break. Then we'll take another breath, and we'll be done. And we can do it as many times as you'd like if you feel like you want to do it again.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to set you up with our countdown, starting with 3, 2, 1.
You kind of froze up there. Can you do it again, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your screen once in a while it freezes up.
Okay. Yes, we've got multiple folks on the internet, and it's raining here today, so that might happen quite a bit. So thank you for letting me know. I'll do that again. 3, 2, 1.
You know what? Spirit tells me this is a good time to take a break. Did I say that right?
Oh, that was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you. I love when people put their own spin. That was beautiful. Thank you, Jeanine. I love that so much. So I'm going to go ahead and read our commercial copy because they tell me that's my job. Okay? Are you ready to embrace your inner magic and become a better witch? Join the 6-month BetterWitch Magic Intensive Coaching Program. Unveil the power of self-realization, meditation, rituals, and more. Elevate your practice with live classes and one-on-one sessions with me, Alysha Kravetz. Plus, enjoy exclusive perks, including almost $1,000 in savings on magical products and services. And the BetterWitch Magic Intensive Kit, which contains over $200 worth of tools and goodies to help you on your Better Witch journey. Don't miss your chance to become a better witch. You can learn more now at bronxwitch.com/coaching. All right, plug over. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely fantastic.
Great.
So, we'll go ahead and get started on chatting. I was telling our lovely viewers before we got started that this episode has been quite some time in the making because we were rescheduling and moving things around. And I'm so glad that we were able to actually nail down a time to talk to each other. And I'm really excited because each of the episodes of this podcast is entitled A Better Blank Witch. And the idea is that through these really sort of casual conversations between two witches, I find that there is a lot of wisdom and a lot that can be gained from these types of chats, even more so than like a straightforward kind of interview. And so each episode, we kind of cover a topic that our guest co-host is an expert in. So we can hear, from their real life perspective, like what they've gone through and why they've gone down that path or why that area of the craft has called to them, with the hopes of making the journey a little smoother and a little better for the next generation. Maybe there are some things that we've gone through that we can talk about so that people can maybe avoid some of the mistakes we made or, kind of fast forward a little bit through some of the trial and error that a lot of us have gone through. And it is super, super special for me as a Wiccan of color to have the guest co-host for being a better Wiccan witch also be a person of color. Because that is something that I guess because of the nature of me and my channel that I get quite a bit of commentary about. People are so curious about where do I find other Wiccans of color? Like, where are they and how can I learn? Or, is this part of the craft or this particular pagan tradition for me, being that I am a person of color and the originators of Wicca are not? And so I felt like it was important in sort of a symbolic way for folks to see that when we are talking about the practice of Wicca, that we do have voices of color out there who can speak with expertise on this practice. And so I'm just really thankful and honored that you are here, that you're in this walk to help the rest of us, and that you're here, for this episode. So just first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It really is. I'm so sorry it took me a while to get here, but I'm here now, and I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, I'm very happy.
All in divine timing. I always say.
All in divine timing.
Yeah, perfect timing for that. So, folks got to listen to your intro and a bit of your bio at the start, so they already have some idea of who you are. But I think I did want to sort of start at the top. Usually I don't, but I think your story is moving and important for people to know. And so I do kind of want to start a little bit at the beginning and talk a little bit about what your journey into Wicca was like 30 years ago, when it was not necessarily as well written about, as popular, as well known. How was it that you found yourself exploring Wicca in the first place, and then, going on that journey of initiating and actually rising to the level of High Priestess?
Well, my journey was not much different than like the average African American or Black woman or Black person. I started off in church. And my mother was a very devout Christian. So we would go to church at least every Sunday. Sometimes we would go like the middle of the week. We would often
Mm-hmm.
go during holidays like New Year's Eve or something like to that effect. Um,
Yeah.
and but all during the time I'm growing up and I'm going to church, I was never happy. I never understood why people thought that spirit was in church. It was just a building. And I never really found spirituality in the Bible. And the thing that I would see when I would go to church, the first thing I would see is a European person who was blonde with a beard, and they called him Jesus, and I was supposed to bow to him. And I was always born a feminist too. So I had a
Mm-hmm.
double jeopardy there, So
Yeah.
I always said, well, why is God not like me? Why doesn't God look like me? Why is God not a female? Why is God white? Why is he, it just didn't seem, not to say that God wasn't. I'm just saying that, the divine, I felt, in my childlike thoughts was, can't the divine be someone else different? And so I kind of suffered through church all my life up until 13, all my childhood life. And then no, it was closer to 15. And then I just told my mom, I just refused to go back there. I didn't think that the people were nice. I the people that attended church, the things that they would do and say, and I just didn't think spirituality was there in church. So I just left, and then that's when my journey began. I just tried very hard to look around. To find something else. I would just ask questions to different people, talk about, people thought I was crazy because people, I would go to different
Oh,
people
I
and talk about
know.
talk
Yes.
about spirituality in the hopes that someone would tell me, oh, well, I do this and I do that and I go to this temple, I go to that temple, hoping that maybe that would spark something within me that I would like to participate in. And finally, I asked enough questions where I ran into someone, a female, and she said, well, I'm a Buddhist. You might be interested in that. And I'm like, oh, great. I heard about Buddhists. In fact, my girlfriend used to be a Buddhist. Maybe I'll start there. And so I did go there. I attended their services. And it was closer to what I was looking for, but it just wasn't enough. And then I used to listen to NPR a lot um,
Yeah.
as a young adult. And one day, for some reason, just spirit just told me, if you listen to NPR will tell you where you're meant to go. See, it's just so wonderful about these
Mm-hmm.
little breadcrumbs that universe cans out to you when you're seeking.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
just tells you, and intuitively, that, hey, I'm supposed to walk this path, and it's going to take me where I need to go. So the path I took was listening to NPR every single day, every night. I would leave it on, and then one day I was riding with my mother, and I think I wrote this in the book. I'm not sure, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. But into to one day I was walking. Excuse me. One day I was driving with my mom. We come
Mm-hmm.
back from shopping, and um, and I was just about to pull up into the house, but Spirit told me turn on the radio. So I did. And as I was turning it on, and my mother was getting out the car, I heard the switch, and she was being interviewed by an interviewer, by the anchor, and she talked about magic. She talked about the moon. She talked about spirituality. And then when they had callers call in, they were reading the Bible to her. They told her that, she should be ashamed of herself. But I didn't feel that way. I felt grateful, because she was talking about something I needed to hear. So I went she had a store, and I went downtown Philadelphia to where the store was. It was called, I don't know if it's still there, it was called the Hand of Aries. And I went there, and it was a bookstore, and it was it was a spiritual store, and it had all different types of things. And so I picked up a few books, and I picked up like little statues and stuff like that. And I just felt like I was home there. And she talked to me about Wicca. And that's how I got started with Wicca.
Wow, I love that because I feel like I can resonate and really relate to your story, and I definitely feel like a lot of our viewers and listeners will also feel the same way, kind of regardless of their own personal backgrounds. But so many of us start off our young lives in the church. And like you, my mom was, even up till now, COVID kind of it changed that because she's older, she's in her 80s. So, that kind of took her out of going to church, but now she like Zooms church. But for our entire lives, we grew up in church every single Sunday, on the choir, on the YPD. My mom was in the floral club. I think my aunt was a missionary. And so church really was everything in life. And I enjoyed the community and the fellowship aspect of church. I liked having my church friends, and I love the songs and dance. I loved being on the choir. I love things you can't barely hold a note. But in church they don't tell you that. Everybody can. Yes, and and church is wonderful.
I still love the songs. I'll go to church just to listen to the songs. I love the songs. That's where our talent. That's how we got our talent. It started in the church, the singing.
Yes.
And you can really see the roots of our ancestors right there in the church,
Yes.
So I do miss it. I do miss the church. I miss like you said, the fellowship. I miss that. And I wish that as pagans, we had that same thing. Although, we do circle, and I do enjoy going to a circle from time to time. But there's something about being in a church with being, with our, people of color who sing the way we sing, and and you can hear the ancestors in their voice. You can and as they do have their Holy Ghost type thing, you can see the dancing in the church the way you would see it, or the way our ancestors used to dance, and dance around the moon, and dance around the stars, and dance outside, and and just do communion that way. That's where we get it from. We got it from our ancestors. It's really deep. And so, we have pagan roots. We do. And a lot of people want to deny that. They want to deny that, well, we all started as Christians. No, we didn't. We started as pagans. Our ancestors were pagans. You might not call it pagans. You might call it something different. But we were pagans. And I think that pagan spirit called to me a long time ago. It did. From the time I was from the time I was born, it called to me. It told me that God isn't just male. God could be female. God isn't in a book. God is everywhere. God is earth-based, and God is beyond. So, I needed that, and that's what I searched for, and that's what the universe gave me.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about where you felt like church was lacking and where it did give you something, because for me, that was the one thing that church did for me. The song, the dance, the different rituals, those were the times where I felt spiritually charged, where I felt the energy moving through the place, and I felt like I was connecting to something higher, something divine, something, full of unconditional love. When I was sitting in sermons or in Sunday school, oh my gosh, I used to get into so much trouble in Sunday school because of the questions I would ask. But shout out to Miss Livingston and Miss Washington because they took the brunt of my questions that nobody really had good answers to. And I was like, this doesn't feel the same way it feels when we're in the middle of song, in the middle of dance. There's something else that I'm connecting to that I feel sometimes here, but not all the time. And for me, that little spirit told you to listen to NPR. For me, my interest in paganism came in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a show called Charmed. You might be familiar. And
Yes, I
I was a
am.
huge fan. Yeah, right. I don't know if there's a witch that isn't. I was a huge fan of Charmed. And I loved this idea of these witches being painted as these positive figures. They're heroes in the story, and they're using their craft and they're using their pendulums and potions to slay demons and save innocent people. And I was really fascinated about that. And somewhere in a witchy shop downtown, I can't remember if I saw a sign or if someone said the word, but someone basically said, well, witches are Wiccan, which obviously isn't a true statement. Obviously, there are many types of witches that are not Wiccan, but someone kind of made the connection to this word Wicca that I had never heard before. I was about 13 years old when this happened. And it just so happened that my little tiny private middle school had just gotten a computer lab, and we got this access to this thing called the internet, which, as you recall, at the time, there was no Google, there wasn't even an Ask Jeeves. A computer screen that was black with a little green square, and you could type things out on it, and then you might get an answer or something. And Spirit
The
told
World
me
Wide Web. That's what they called it. The World
the
Wide
World
Web back
Wide
in the
Web, and
day.
you would print, and you would print on those like carbon copy pages that were all attached to each other, and so this was the very beginnings of like the World Wide Web. And something said, ask this daggone device, ask this thing, what is Wicca? What is this word that you just heard of? Because I couldn't find it in encyclopedias, I couldn't find it in the books in my school. So I go to the computer, and I always remember I was in the computer lab by myself, and I typed in, what is Wicca? And it gave me back some information, very rudimentary information, but it basically gave me some of the key points of the tenets of Wicca. And I remember just having this like moment where it was like the room got dark and it was just like me and the screen, and I'm reading and I'm like, I believe that. I believe that. I believe that. That's what I've been trying to say. That's what they don't say in church. I always thought that was true. You mean to tell me there are people out here who think this way and they have a name for themselves? Like, it was unbelievable for me to discover this thing. And then, of course, the floodgates were open, and then I couldn't stop. And, every Barnes and Noble I could find, I was in the New Age section reading every single book that I could. And that is where I felt that same energy I would feel when we were in song and dance in church. I felt that when I would be sitting reading my books on witchcraft and crystals and divination. I felt like this is that bigger thing that I feel is out there, but I didn't really know how to put a word to or connect with in my own way. And I feel like a lot of folks can really relate to that journey of starting out in church and feeling like there's just something else and not knowing yet what that is.
That
But
was.
having those, right, like you said, those little breadcrumbs that would be dropped in our path to lead us to where we could find more information. and our listeners are saying, yes, I can definitely identify, they can relate to these stories. I think this is very much, the path that a lot of us go on, especially people of color, starting out first in the Christian church, especially here in the U.S.
I believe Toni Morrison, she said that one of the things she said was when she went to church, she couldn't understand why people thought that God was in the church because she always said that God is outside of the church. God is in nature,
Mm-hmm.
God is in the moon. So she never understood why she had to go to church because she never felt that God was there.
Yeah.
God is there, but to me, as an earth-based soul, no, isn't not the place that I would go to seek God. I mean, everybody's different.
Yeah.
My mother was perfectly happy in church. I don't mind going from time to time just so I can get that spiritual music that I can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but like you said, if you're not meant to be there, then the universe does, different types of serendipities and
Yeah.
um, coincidences and breadcrumbs to bring you where you're meant to be because I would have never been here without those breadcrumbs. I would have never been here.
Yeah.
When after I decided that I was going to be some type of metaphysical, I wasn't sure if Wicca was for me or not. I personally, I thought maybe if I could find a teacher or a priest or priestess in like African American diaspora, I would have been happy doing that because I felt like maybe I needed to get in touch with the ancestors. But the thing
Mm-hmm.
about the universe is it doesn't always work out the way you think it's supposed to be.
No.
When I
No.
first moved when I first moved to North Carolina, I said, okay, now that I'm here, and it's probably harder for me to find, an African tradition to follow or a teacher here because you're in the South. This is the Bible Belt. I was going to try anyway, and so in between the finding someone, I remember asking the universe a question, and I took some spring water and I put it in a bowl, and this was one of my first spells I ever cast, and I put some spring water and probably some rose oil in a bowl, and I wanted to scry to see if I could find the answer to a very important question in my life. And so I scried and scried for hours and I couldn't. So I just poured the water out and, I kept asking the questions, but nothing came up. So I poured the water out. And then some years later, no, it wasn't even years, it was months. Some months later, where I was living, um, a hurricane came and tore up the place that I was living. And so I was forced to move in with my girlfriend until I could find another place. And when FEMA came, and I said, "Look, I'm trying to find another place. The place that I was living just got torn all to pieces." And so they said, "Well, you know what? Your 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 credit is pretty good. Why don't you try to buy a house?" And I said, "Well, maybe I should. You going to help me?" And they said, "Yeah, we'll help you." And so, they gave me special funds because I was, a victim of Fran, which was the hurricane back in
Yeah.
those days.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And so they gave me that. They gave me special funds, and so I found a house. And then after I found the house, I also ran into some African traditional people. I want to say they were Kemetic, but I was too young to understand anything in those days. But I believe they were
Right.
Kemetic, and so they used to circle on Sundays. So once in a while, I would go to circle with them on Sundays. But the first time I went there, the high priestess took me around the altars because they had like 7 altars. and they introduced me to each and every god and goddess, African god and goddess, or energies they call them. And they took me around to Batala, Ogun, and Oshun. But the final last goddess, and most of it was like when they were talking to me and explaining it to me, I felt like they were Charlie Brown's parents or something, because they were blah 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 blah, and I'm like, I don't understand any of this. Blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah.
Right,
So
right.
when I finally got to the last altar, it all became clear to me. The last altar was Oya. And she was still blah, blah, blah until she said something that was specific. And that was, she said, this is Oya. She's the goddess of storms. She takes you where you were supposed to be, where you are, and moves you to where you're meant to be. And that's when I
Wow.
started thinking, that's why I take her name today. Now, let's go back to when I had that bowl of water when I was crying.
Yeah.
The question that I kept asking that night was, should I try to buy a house? That was the question.
Wow.
Oya answered my prayer.
Right.
And just talking about it now, I feel my I don't know, my brain moving,
Yeah, the
you
tingles.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel it, because the universe is saying, yeah, tell that story, tell that story. But so that's another, um serendipity, breadcrumbs. If you're determined to find your path, the universe will take you where you're meant to be. And that's what it
Yes.
did. And that's how I came to the Orishas, because of those people that I happened to run into. I don't know how I ran into them, and they kind of explained to me, the ancestors. And so,
Yeah.
down the line, I not only I felt like I needed to combine them. Nobody else that I had known, when I finally started meeting people who were Wiccans, well, mostly witches. No one else combined, you know, African ancestors
Right.
with
The
witches.
Orisha
They
and
usually the
Wiccan practice. Right.
Celtics, or the Vikings, or the or some other type of
Maybe the
European,
Egyptian.
or
Yeah.
even Egyptian. Some of them, but I never ran into anybody that did the Orishas. I was the first one that I had known of that integrated the Orishas or Orisha with my spirituality, which is Wicca. Um,
Right.
so I said, why can't I? Everybody else does it. They have
Yeah.
their different types of gods, but it wasn't Orisha.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because I was actually going to ask you that, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. And folks are really enjoying hearing about this, and folks are talking about reading about some of these stories in your book. And this is Miranda says Black Girl Magic, and Jamaican Douglas says this podcast was the universe answering some questions. Too many perfect things perfectly lined up today, so people are having some serendipitous moments even now listening to this story, which is beautiful for me because that's what I would hope for this episode. But I'm really glad that you have started talking about how connecting with your ancestry and perhaps the energies of your ancestors, specifically in this case the Orisha, how you've been able to meld that with your Wiccan practice. Because one thing that I do find as a Black Wiccan is I often come across other witches of color. It's a lot more common these days to run into other witches and have them be witches of color. And they often have a similar story about finding Wicca first, but then leaving because there was something missing from Wicca for them. And oftentimes it is that ancestral component where they feel
Aspect.
like Wicca, right, where Wicca is too European for them to really be able to feel that deep connection. I personally didn't feel that way when I found Wicca 20 plus years ago. I knew that it was the path for me and I just needed to make it my own. And that's what I've done and that's why I have stayed. But what has it been like for you melding your Wiccan practice with your discovery and connection with the Orisha? And what might you share with others if they're like wondering if they can do the same thing? Is that too weird? Are the Orisha going to be mad because Wicca was created by some white dudes? What has that been like bringing the two for you spiritually? What has that felt?
Well, of course, when I first started and I started doing it, you run into resistance. Well, why can't you, do African traditional religions
Right.
or,
Just
or
initiate
if,
into Eva.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
and why if you do that, then why you're going to use Orishas and Risha, and I just feel like um the universe guided me to both the Orisha because that's where I found myself, with Oya, and then the universe guided me with Wicca, and then Wicca's mixed with people. A lot of people integrate different types of spiritualities with Wicca. Uh,
Mhm.
the thing about it is, if we would go to the first people in this world, the first people, and they say witchcraft is the first religion because
Mhm.
and of course women women created that first religion even more so. I'm going to stick my neck out and say the females of human history started witchcraft. We had that power. And and if you go back and look at some history, the first different types of idols and statues were female. You know,
Mhm.
so you look at Venus, what they call the Venus type statues, the voluptuous, big breasted, big hip statues. Those were goddesses, and they were the first.
Mhm.
They were the first gods, and they were the first religions. And
Mhm.
so I think that personally, uh, when you really you peel off everything that's human, and you go into the spirit, then you realize that spirit doesn't look at necessarily color. Spirit
Mhm.
doesn't look at the human aspect. It looks at the spiritual aspect. We are all humans. We are all spirits having a human experience. So
Right.
it doesn't when we connect with spirit's not saying, oh, wait a minute, what color are you? What religion are you? Spirit looks at how your vibrations are and how you vibrate. And Orisha is energy. They don't
Mhm.
even the Africans don't call them gods or god. They call them energies,
Right. Right. Right.
And so and they're aspects of different types of energies. So yeah, well, we had Orishas, in Africa and and Laos, and we had different types of gods all over the world. But it's not the gods itself; it's the energy behind what they represent. And
Right.
so I don't just go, and let me just make this clear. I don't just go to the Orisha. I mean, they're my home. I'm not gonna lie about that. They're my home.
Mhm.
But Morgan called me too, and
Mhm.
I didn't expect it. And
Right.
they say that you don't choose Morgan. Morgan chooses you,
Right.
and she chose me. And the first real goddess that, well, besides Oya, is Hecate. Hecate called me too. So
Shout out
I I
Hecate.
re,
Shout out Hecate, a room full of witches. You know she's there. Shout out Hecate.
You
She
know
comes for
she's
us
there.
big time. Oh yeah.
Now I think she has an Egyptian name too. Hecate. If you look it up,
Mm.
Hek. They say she started in Egypt, and of
Yes,
course,
I've
when the
seen that
Greeks
form.
started taking,
Hekate. Yeah.
hmm yes. So, and she started up in Egypt as the goddess of midwives and women and protection. I believe children too. She protected children, and she was started off as a frog. But when the Greeks got her, they personified her, and then gave her the because she's so old and ancient. They made her a goddess over all gods.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Greek god, I can't even think of his name. Even
Zeus, maybe? Was Zeus
say it
Greek?
again.
Was it Zeus? Is Zeus Greek?
The god over.
I'm bad
Thank
with
you,
those.
Zeus. The god over Zeus. So, and Goose, if you can remember, Zeus heads all the Olympians. He heads everyone, but he doesn't
Right.
mess with Hecate. Hecate has
Right.
her own domain. He is Zeus assigned different god, his family to different parts. But he didn't touch her. She's still the queen of the witches over the universal sky. And
Mm-hmm.
so she's very powerful. And I didn't know that. I only know that she called me. I knew that she called me, but it took years for me to research her and find out who she is. And she's the queen of the witches. She trained me.
Mm-hmm.
She trained me how to be a witch when I was a baby witch. And because I knew that she was the goddess of the dark moon. So I always had an altar for her during the dark moon. But she told me, she says, now forget everything that you ever learned, forget it all, because I'm going to teach you from scratch. So every dark moon, I would have representations of her on my altar. But she would make me clean my house from top to bottom just
Wow.
before the dark moon. And then I would do rituals for her. And I did that. It was tiring. I did it for like
Mm-hmm.
2 years with her. But she taught me so much about being a witch. She was my teacher,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful when you're called by spirits,
Yeah,
by
I
the
think
goddess,
that like
gods and goddesses.
yeah, I think that one of the hangups, and this is just me personally, I'm sure people would disagree, but I think that one of the sources of the hangups, or one of the things that happens with Black practitioners when they leave the church, and I've heard some other folks say this too, so I know I'm not alone in thinking this, but I think what happens sometimes is folks leave the church because for whatever reason something's missing or they have a bad experience, it doesn't fulfill them in some way, and they go looking for different spiritual traditions or different pagan traditions, and they change their behaviors. They go from going to church every Sunday and all of this thing to now they're going to community meetings and circles and things like that, but they don't necessarily change their mentality. I think what happens to a lot of witches of color that leave the church is that they take with them this very church oriented idea that there's only one right way and that spirituality is in a box, the way religion is in a box. And so I think that's
Hmm.
what happens. I think a lot of witches of color leave the church and they find the ATRs or any other like pagan practice or spiritual practice, and they have that same mentality of, well, now I've got to be, I was in this box, in the Jesus box, and that didn't work for me, but so now I'm over in the Ifa box, or now I'm in the
Hmm.
Voodoo box, and I can only work with these energies, and I have to do all of these practices, and um, I think that is what leads practitioners of color to have what I think is a incorrect notion that there's only one set of energies that you should be working with or can work with or have permission to work with or anything like that. And what has happened for me, and one of the reasons why I have not initiated into any particular practice and why I'm at least at the current moment very glad about that, is because I didn't have that. I didn't go from the church and then into some other sort of structured or dogmatic practice that said, well, now you're over here, so you've got to work with these energies and not any of these because they're not the right color, or they don't come from the right continent, or what have you. Because I was a solitary for all of my practice and uninitiated, I got to let what called to me call to me. And if it didn't make sense to other people and doesn't make sense to other people, that was going to have to just be okay, because I wasn't going to ignore what was calling to me. And I also wasn't going to pretend like certain energies of certain traditions were calling to me when they weren't. And I wasn't going to pretend just because I'm Black, because I have African ancestry, that I must pretend that, these particular spirits really called to me. Some of them have, but not all of them have. And for me, that makes perfect sense, because I feel like one of the big difference between religions, particularly the dogmatic ones, and spirituality is that religion is a box that everybody has to fit into, and spirituality is completely unique to the person. And there are as many spiritualities on this earth as there are people. And to me, that makes way more sense than the idea that we would clump up into these groups where we all kind of, follow each other and subscribe to the same thing. So I thank you for sharing that part of your journey and how different spirits of different lineages have called to you, because I think that will be really helpful for our listeners in knowing that while you might adopt a particular religion, because of religion, and I enjoy it and it works for me, and I choose it because I do enjoy practicing the same rituals as other people and having the same prayers and holidays and festival foods and things like that, and I like the community and all of that. But I understand that my religion is a choice that I have made for how I want to live my life. Whereas my spirituality isn't so much of a choice as it is what I am. And I can lean into that and let myself be what I am, or I can pretend like that's not happening and put myself into a box, which I have chosen not to do. So I really think that's helpful for our listeners, who many, even if they aren't people of color, might find themselves drawn to a particular path, but at the same time have other energies from outside of that path that are strongly calling to them, that they might be ignoring because, well, it's not within this tradition, or I'm not of this lineage, or, my family didn't come from this community or that. And obviously there are important considerations about being ethical, about not appropriating other people's practices or cultures. But I think at the core, it's really beautiful to hear someone say that the spirits that call you, and you will be more fulfilled by answering that call than ignoring it and trying to put yourself, into a particular box because you look a certain way or you're from a certain place.
Yeah, I think that we do get confused about that, because we all feel like, okay, we're all Black, we're all women, we all come from a different type of culture, so we should practice through that culture. But a lot of people don't realize that the European culture, we have, for example, Christmas is very European. Easter is very European. So it's kind of, you're contradicting yourself when you say, oh, we only have to deal with the African American culture or the African culture, when we've been mixing cultures for a long time. I'm from Philly. I mean, we mixed Italian culture, German, Jew, Jewish culture. We just mixed everything. We practiced different types of cultures and foods and stuff like that in Philly when I was a kid. I don't know how they're doing it now, but when I was a kid, we had a mixture of cultures. And another thing that we have to realize too is that we each, every human being, not black people or white people or Asian people, every human being comes from a different ray. When we were sent here from the universe, we came as spirits, and each of us had assignments of different rays. You might want to look at the study of the seven rays, and we all have different vibrations. All of us are not going to vibrate at the same frequency. We just won't. So just because you might want to be a witch doesn't mean that someone else who is a witch will do the same things that you do. I mean, some people want to be a green witch. Some people want to be a different type of witch, an air witch or any type of different witch. Or they might want to practice something. They want to be a witch, and they might want to practice Buddhism. It's just everybody's just different, and they're doing it based on their own vibration. So we have to remember that we are human first. Excuse me, we're spirits first. I keep saying that. We are spirits first. And we are not going to be happy if we're vibrating on the same frequency as someone else, because we're just as unique as snowflakes as far as our frequency and vibrations are concerned. So I may be called by the frequency of the energy of Morrigan, or I might be called by the frequency of an Asian goddess. What's an Asian goddess? Can't think of an Asian goddess right now. But
I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah, Kuan Yin. I always like Kuan Yin. Yeah, Asian goddess Kuan Yin. I love her too because they have statues in certain places here, and I go to her and I pay my respects to her because she's a goddess of peace, and she does she soothes my soul. So I like different types of energies. I don't think of them necessarily as ethnic types of energies. I think of them as energies that I need at the time, at the moment of this, at this time of my life, or this time of the week. You are called based on your frequency to what energy you need. So you shouldn't feel like you have to stick with Orishas or Lols or Lois or any type of other energies. You don't have to stick with that. You allow yourself to be open and allow spirit to communicate with you, because what you're doing is you're missing out on learning, because that's what energies do. They teach. You're missing out on elevating yourself and elevating your spirit. You're missing out on a lot. And if you limit yourself to only certain types of energies, you may not fulfill yourself as the spirit that was sent here to learn.
Yeah. Oh, that's so. Thank you for saying that. I think that will give a lot of people a lot of peace and reassurance, because it might be confusing to them. Wait a minute, I'm from this background. How is it possible that this spirit is showing up so strongly for me and calling to me so strongly? How can that be possible? And I really appreciate you articulating that we are all here with a different vibration and a different frequency, a different mix of energies that are going to call to us, that don't necessarily fall within the boxes that humans have created. These are spiritual frequencies. These are energetic frequencies that exist outside of human people coming together saying, well, these ones go together, these ones go together, and they're separate. So I think that is going to give people a lot of reassurance and encouragement, not to ignore those calls when they feel them. And of course, like I said, to be ethical, to be respectful, to, educate yourself and not just be wanton, like that. But the more important thing is to answer that call when it comes through, because you're going to learn. These energies are there for us, not just to, be these things we pick up when something's going wrong in our lives, but they're teachers. They're there to be a part of a certain part of our lives in order to give us something that we are going to need. And we might be walking around missing out on that little something that we need to get over this challenge in our life or to go into the next step of our lives. And that energy is right there waiting to teach us and guide us and lead the way. And we might be ignoring it because of some construct that human people have come up with, which we know, good Lord, why we shouldn't let us be in control of anything. So I love that you say that. And I see some folks dropping some really great questions in the chat, so I want to get to those. And I kind of want to start with one that I see because it lines up with one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because you touch upon it in your book. So before we get into the questions, I want to take a moment, if you don't mind. I want to flash the book. Our podcast listeners won't be able to see this, but our YouTube viewers are able to see this. I want to show this. She's thick, y'all, by the way, okay? Knowledge, all right? She's thick. 3 C's over here, okay? This book, Jeanine, I just want to thank you so deeply for this. This is called Portal of Light, an extensive study of Wicca and magic from an African American perspective. And, we sometimes make the statement like, oh, this is the thing I wished I had when I was young, or this is the thing I wished I had 10 years ago. I am in no way being hyperbolic or exaggerating when I say that I wish I had this book when I first got started. And it is my deepest and most genuine prayer that every person interested in Wicca pick up this book. Yes, if you are African American and you are interested in Wicca, this is going to put so much into context. It's going to make so much of why you feel the two can perfectly go together, why it does, where the overlaps are in Wiccan practice with African American culture, and all of that. But even if you are not a person of color, I want you to pick up this book if you have any interest in Wicca whatsoever, because this book is different. So many of the books on Wicca are very similar, I have to admit. I appreciate, love, and respect them all, but they can get quite a bit redundant. And your exploration of how to practice this particular practice is fresh, and it's unique, and it's different, and it puts in a cultural element that I think is often missing from a lot of Wiccan texts. So we have a really small bookstore. We have probably 2, maybe 3 copies of each book that we carry. We have 6 copies of this on the shelf right now, because I am such a huge advocate of it. I keep recommending it to people, and I just love having lots of copies on hand. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to create the course, but then also to write the book for those of us who haven't taken the course or maybe can't take the course with you, to get all of this information. And what you do in this book is so phenomenal. The way you tie in Wiccan practices and principles with African American lifestyle, culture, and traditions. The broom. Man, let me tell you, I have read every Wiccan how-to book I can get my hands on, right? And every Wiccan book is going to cover the besom and the spiritual broom. And I have never, ever, ever heard someone say, oh, but don't African Americans also have spiritual traditions around the broom, jumping the broom, sweeping the home with a particular broom in certain directions? The broom is not just some, made up spiritual tool that Wiccans just decided to have. We see it in other cultures as well, including African American culture still to this day. And just that little bit right there was like, oh my gosh, mind blowing, and just so wonderful. I always felt like my Wiccan religion and my African American ancestry went together seamlessly, but I couldn't necessarily articulate why that was or where those overlaps were. And your book just does such a beautiful job of doing that. So yes, if you're African American, absolutely pick up this book. But anybody who's interested in Wicca and would like to read a book that's just different and doesn't just kind of repeat the same stuff, get your hands on this book. Of course, you can pick it up at our shop, but just get it wherever you can get it. And I just want to thank you deeply for writing it, because I do believe it's super important, and I want to see it, just become like a Cunningham book when it comes to Wicca. One of those books that everyone says, you gotta read through it at least once, So thank you.
No, I appreciate you advocating for it, and I'm very happy that you're enjoying it. I haven't run into anyone who told me that they disliked the book or had any criticism of it. I'm looking for it because it's not going to be my last one, so I want to make sure that I improve. But most people give me glowing reviews, and so I am just feel so blessed that I was able to write a book that, as you said, wished I had it when I was, a baby witch. I would have loved to. Now, there were, like you said, most of them are cookie cutter books, the same thing. You have the basics of Wicca and all that stuff. But I tried to integrate. I wanted to integrate not only African American culture, but other cultures as well into the book. And I wanted to tell a story that was, the Wheel of the Year with the Lord and the Lady that I learned on the World Wide Web by other witches, and try to explain why the Wheel of the Year is so important, because it's so poetic. The story of the Lord and the Lady, and he integrated in each spoke of the will. And I have never seen, and other than when I first started, I've never seen anybody explain it in any of the books. And I said, well, I want to do that. I'm going to explain the Will of the Year, the Lord and Lady, and why the Will of the Year is so important. So a lot of people like that.
And I love the way that you handle it. I love the way that you handle it too, because that was kind of one of my first indications that, like, oh, this book is going to be different, because in every Wiccan book I've ever read, and most books that address the Wheel of the Year, it's addressed once. And you address it like 3 times in this book, and you get different perspectives on the Wheel of the Year. There's like, yeah, we've got the sort of established Wiccan Wheel of the Year, and which of these particular holidays we have historical context for, and which we pretty much know we sort of just like made up. And but then you come back around to the Wheel of the Year from a cultural perspective, and back around again from an African American perspective, and that alone let me know that, okay, this book is really going to show me something different, because even the idea that the Wheel of the Year can be looked at differently is really, really beautiful. So I thank you so much for that. I have a book club, and we meet every month, and we read Portal of Light at the start of the year. I think we started the year with it. And it was a great read. Everyone really enjoyed it. And I encourage everyone to pick up a copy and read it. And one of the questions that is coming through, so we'll start moving into some of the questions, if you don't mind, so I don't talk your ear off all evening long. But we had a great question. I'm going to try to go back to get as many as I can. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, there is a Q&A drop box specifically where you can drop your questions so I can, make sure that I see them. But I'm going to try to scroll through the chat to find ones that have been coming along while we've been chatting. But one of the ones that first came through was from Jamaican Dula, who asked, have you practiced or experienced hoodoo? And if so, what similarities or differences are there to Wiccan practices? And I can tell you for sure that this in your book, Portal of Light, you definitely touch on many similarities between Wiccan practice and either African American kind of folk practices or hoodoo practices specifically. But since this is more posed to you and your experience, have you practiced or experienced hoodoo? And if so, what was your experience with that? Were there similarities to your Wiccan practice that you found?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Practice, what is it again?
Hoodoo. Have you practiced or experienced hoodoo? Yeah, and are there any similarities or differences to Wicca that you have found?
Well, hoodoo is interesting practice because our ancestors were sent all over the United States, and sometimes they were sent away from the group that they came with, or a group that that's part of their that came from their same area of Africa. And so we were sent everywhere, and so in the mixture of different areas that we went, and the people who the people who were slaves, they lost their traditions, their common traditions, because you might have had someone from east or south or somewhere else in Africa, different countries. So they lost their tradition. So what they did was they did remember magic, or they were taught magic. So what they did was they remembered their own types of magic, and they kind of mixed them together with European magic, with mostly Native Americans, and then we were also taught the Christian religion too. So we used the Bible as in our practices, and that's how hoodoo came into being. We used to, and also we have to realize too, when we got here, we didn't have the same plants and roots and stuff that we had in Africa. So we had to learn from the natives of what this plant does and what qualities and benefits they had as far as magic and spirituality is concerned. So we had to go to them to teach us what we didn't, the plants that we didn't know. So we mixed our European Jewish spirituality. We mixed the Celtics. We mixed different types of magic, and we got hoodoo. So Wicca is kind of similar because there is a mixture of German magic. It's a mixture of Celtic magic. It's a mixture of all different types of European magic. So it's kind of similar. We can use the roots
with a little sprinkle of Eastern philosophy.
Right, with Western philosophy, and we mixed it all up. But and I'm writing another book called Purple Haze, and I'm going to be talking about that. And in the book, I'm talking about how a lot of the magic that we know today as hoodoo, we learned it as kids. Because that was urban magic. Hoodoo is basically urban magic. My mother used to tell me a story about how a husband and wife broke up, or boyfriend and girlfriend broke up, because the boyfriend had another woman in his bed when the girlfriend wasn't there, and the other woman poured salt underneath the bed, and so that salt eliminated the girlfriend, and not the other woman, but the other woman. She poured the salt, so she used the salt. That that is hoodoo. I remember as a kid, I used to sweep. We stood sweep. I had the responsibility to sweep in the kitchen, and there were times when I accidentally swept someone's foot, an adult's foot, and they would take the broom away from me and threaten to spit on the broom, and I'm like, spit on the broom? I just swept your feet. What are you doing? I'm a kid. I'm like, why would you? And my mother would say, oh, that's just the way old folks think. That's what they do, old folks. But actually, what she was saying was, that's hoodoo. That's our ancient way of doing it. So when you sweep somebody's feet, they think of it as you cursing them. So you spit on the broom, then you eliminate that curse. Right. So we have it in our. Women, what they do with hair, they burn the hair so nobody else can take the hair and use it against them. So that's hoodoo. And then we use the Bible as a charm, and that's deeply rooted in us. We practice it regardless. When I was a kid, my mom used to laugh at people when they would have. Well, she didn't laugh at them, but she would kind of, when people had certain types of problems, my mother used to say, "Oh, you better go and see Aunt Jane about that." Now, this is like I said, my mother was a devout Christian, but she was raised in the Deep South, where hoodoo was there, eastern part. So she was like related to the Geechees and stuff like that. So she knew about hoodoo, and she would laugh and say, "Well, you better go visit Aunt Jane." That was her way of laughing it off. You have issues, go see Aunt Jane. But I didn't know what Aunt Jane was until later. I found out that Aunt Jane and Uncle Tom, or Uncle, I shouldn't have used the word Tom, but Uncle Harry or something like that. You go see them for for magic when you need strong hoodoo magic. So so hoodoo. So we practice hoodoo anyway. If you're Black, if you're African American, we practice hoodoo. We might not realize it, but we practice it.
Yeah, and the overlap, I think it's important to point out that the development of hoodoo and the development of Wicca have some overlaps, in the sense that we're talking about practices that have come from people that have traveled around, whether voluntarily or by force, but moving through different spaces, interacting with different people, and kind of putting together their practices, whether it's because they needed to, maybe certain herbs or roots weren't available, so they had to modify and use the herbs and roots that another group of people were using for a similar purpose. Whether it's certain prayers or rituals, certain holidays, changes in the season, and things like that. I took a hoodoo class, and one of the teachers of the class said, we have to be really mindful that there's a difference between cultural, I think the way he put it was cultural appropriation and cultural assimilation. That we don't exist in these little boxes. Over human history, we have moved around and mixed with each other through marriage, through war, through forced being together in all these different ways. Different cultures rub up against each other and take on some of the practice or the traits of those other groups, and that is beautiful in a sense, and that has given birth to other practices. And both Wicca and Hoodoo have that in common, that you have people of different backgrounds from different places, maybe in Europe or in Africa, but having different backgrounds, different languages, different practices, and those folks coming together. And then on top of that, also interacting with other people and having that kind of influence their magic and influence their practices. So Wicca and Hoodoo have that kind of strong thread in common, which is that originating out of mixtures of culture, people with mixtures of backgrounds and experiences to begin with, unlike some of the older practices that really maybe got started just among one group of people that maybe didn't interact with other groups of people for long periods of time and were quite a bit more isolated and insulated in their development. And so, yeah, I think that's a really great point that there's, even aside from like specific practices, and I definitely recommend checking out Portal of Light, because if you want to read about some of the specific practices in Wicca that are similar to specific practices in African American spirituality and folk magic, there are lots of examples of that. But I think it's sort of like an overarching thread between the two. The big thing that the two have in common is that they're born of people that were eclectic and that were multicultural, and therefore influenced by many different sources of magic and of ritual. So I think that's a great question, and thank you so much for answering it. Mika is giving us. Mika is giving us the
we needed it came out of necessity for survival. We did.
Very true. Very true. Mika is giving us the name of Hecate as the Kemetic energy, and it's Heket. Heket or Heqet. Mika says she's a primordial deity and Kemetic spiritual practice. So thank you so much for that, Mika. Getting us right on that one. Yes. Let me check the YouTube chat just to see if there are any more questions here. I don't see any others here. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right. So I think those are like the big questions that we have. And in the interest of time, I'm going to start wrapping us up here so that you can go off into your evening. I want to make sure that people know about what's coming next from you, though, and where they can connect with you further if they want to continue this conversation. So you mentioned Purple Haze, your next book. When can we expect that from you, and is there anything else we should be looking out for?
No, I guess with Purple Haze, though, it'll start off as a course, the way Put Up Light did. So it'll start off as a course, and then and hopefully I should have it like the beginning of next year, and then the book probably the middle or the end of next year. And if you're interested in taking a course, it's at www.aawiccan.org.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I want to make sure everybody, like, if you would like a full course on Wicca, you would perhaps like to go beyond even the book and get some person-to-person instruction from Jeanine, then I really encourage you guys to visit her website, aawiccan.org. That's where you can find the course, the extensive course on Wicca, open to all, great for African Americans, but open to all. And then coming soon, Purple Haze, the next course that Jeanine's going to be treating us with. And I'll definitely be looking out for the book when it comes to us in divine timing, as always. So I want to thank you so much, Jeanine, for all of your wisdom, all of your insight. Thank you for sharing your stories and just being a figure in the Wiccan world for all of us Wiccans of color who are looking for others who have had a similar path. I just want to thank you so much and remind everybody that when we know better, we witch better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been really, truly amazing for me. The folks tuning in all the time, so it's very redundant, but I really do these episodes for me And it's good that it educates other people, but I really ask people to be on this show that I feel like can help me in my path. And your book and the work that you do have definitely done that for me. So I just want to thank you again and know that you have so much support here in the Bronx from the Witches at HQ. And if you ever find yourself in New York, you got to come visit us because we would love to have you. You have a home
Oh, of
here.
course. Of course, if I come to New York, I think of you first. But I have to tell you that I've learned so much from your show. I've seen
Oh,
a few episodes of your show, and I really have learned a lot from your
mhm.
show. And your show is needed. It's very much needed in the community. And I want to thank you for offering it and having it available for people to access your show and learn, because you have a diverse amount of people that you interview, and they have all different types of experiences and spiritualities that and I love hearing your take on different things. So I do appreciate you having this platform for us.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That means so much. I
Mhm.
really appreciate that. Thank you for those beautiful words. We're just getting a bunch of thank yous in the comments from everyone who's tuning in. They're thanking you for your time. Thank you for answering their questions. So this has just been so wonderful. And what will happen next is when I get it together, because it's been a little overwhelming with all this going on with the shop and everything like that. But I'm hoping to have season 3 available on podcast platforms in November or so. And so you will receive an email from me around then with the exact date and the link to actually listen to the edited version on podcast platforms. Of course, in the meantime, you can always refer people to this video on my YouTube channel if you'd like to share with them. This behind the scenes live taping is publicly available for everybody. So I want to just thank you so much. This has just been really incredible. I do see another question coming in, but I do have to let Jeanine go. And I really hope that
Oh,
you will join us again for another episode. We'll be able to tackle that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I also wanted to let people
Yeah.
know that they could join our group on Facebook. I meant to
Oh,
tell you that before. We
no, that's
have a group on
great.
Facebook, African American Wiccans, on Facebook. So look that up
Yes.
and feel free to join us. Yeah.
Yeah, look that up, Jamaican. You might be interested, and that might be an opportunity for you to shoot that question about the Wheel of the Year to Jeanine over in the Facebook group. So I encourage you guys to go check it out. African American Wiccans is the group on Facebook. So definitely check that out. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go out of the room. I want to remind you to please leave this screen open. You're going to see a little dial that's going to tell you that your audio is uploading, and it will notify you. I think it changes from blue to green or something like that when it's all done, and it's safe for you to close your web browser and log off and all that good stuff. And I appreciate your patience letting the audio upload.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a
I'll
great
leave it
night and
open.
blessed be. Thank you.
Blessed be. Blessed be. Love and light.
Yay.
Bye.
All right. So wonderful, wonderful. Let's see. I think Jeanine popped out of the room. Hopefully she'll come back in so that can upload. But I'm gonna go ahead and go through our outro and get out of here, guys. The shop closed 10 minutes ago, so I know my shop witches are like, can you get out of the relax room so we can close up? So thank you, witches, for tuning in to this episode of season 3 of the Better Witch podcast. Remember, hold on. I'm going to do that 1 second. Let me just, I get like partying out there. I think we have guests. Hold on, everybody. My dear, I'm just about done. Yeah, they said they were they're changing up all the gangs. So, I know, he was saying he wanted to get out of the store. And you just wrap up with the folks. Okay. All right, the music was a little loud. I was worried it was going to get picked up. Okay, here we go. Ready? Thank you, witches, for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast. Remember, no matter where you're tuning in from, we want to know what you think about today's episode. So make sure to leave us a review wherever you are. A special thank you to our sponsors who made this episode possible. You can support this podcast by grabbing some sweet merch over in the Beyond BronxWitch merch shop, sponsoring an episode with an ad spot, or following us on Instagram at BetterWitch Podcast. Remember, witches, when we know better, we witch better. See you in the next episode, and blessed be. Did you guys hear any talking in the background while I was saying that? We've got some folks in the shop. So let me know if you could hear talking, and I'll do it one more time. Let me know. And yes, Jeanine is a goddess, and this was a beautiful episode. I'm really excited for this one to air. It's going to be super dope. Yes, you could hear the talking. Okay, let me close the door. I didn't close the door. Let me do that one more time. Okay, thank you, Jamaican, being my awesome AV tech right now. Okay, here we go. Let's do it one more time. Paper, so I sound. Oh, that's weird. That does help a lot. I gotta get soundproofing in here. Okay. Excuse me for blocking the camera, you guys. Thank you, witches, for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the BetterWitch podcast. Remember, no matter where you're tuning in from, we want to know what you think about today's episode. So make sure to leave us a review wherever you are. A special thank you to our sponsors who made this episode possible. You can support this podcast by grabbing some sweet merch over in the Beyond BronxWitch merch shop, sponsoring an episode with an ad spot, or following us on Instagram at BetterWitch Podcast. Remember, witches, when we know better, we witch better. See you in the next episode, and blessed be. Wow, that's amazing how much of a difference it makes to put the paper around the microphone. I hear in here like how much clearer that is. That's wild. I gotta get a sound studio. The difference is incredible. All right, that's gonna have to be as good as it gets. I gotta wrap it up around here so my shop witches aren't waiting for me all night. And I just want to thank you guys all for tuning into this episode. This was super, super dope. We've got more episodes for Season 3 coming along. So please make sure you click the notification button, click the bell, make sure you check the drop-down menu, and make sure the bell is set to all episodes, and do all the things. Make sure your devices know. I wish I could tell you when the next episode is going to be recorded, but I can't. Still working on that with all of our invited guests. So you're just going to have to turn on your notifications so you know the next time we are recording. Oh, thank you, Cynthia. That's really sweet. You all are a goddess. And thank you all for being here. Good night, Nisi. Good night, Eclectic Goddess. Thank you all for being here. Have a great night. Blessed be.